So that's the military threat. With regard to the nuclear option, they say, Pentagon intelligence, Iran's nuclear program and its willingness to keep open the possibility of developing nuclear weapons is a central part of its deterrent strategy. Okay? Those are all quotes. The clerical regime, brutal clerical regime, it's doubtless a threat to its own people, but it hardly outranks U.S. allies in that regard. That can't be the problem. The threat lies elsewhere, and it's ominous. And the reports say, yes, it's ominous. One element of the threat is Iran's potential deterrent capacity. That's an illegitimate exercise of sovereignty that might interfere with U.S. freedom of action in the region. It's glaringly obvious why Iran would seek a deterrent capacity. Just take a look at the disposition of military bases and nuclear forces in the region. And actually that's been recognized 7 years ago. Israel's one of the leading military historians in Israel, Martin von Crefeld, wrote that, it was right after the invasion of Iraq, the world has witnessed how the United States attacked Iraq for, as it turned out, no reason at all. Had the Iranians not tried to build nuclear weapons, they would be crazy, his words, particularly when they're under constant threat of attack by the U.S., incidentally in violation of the UN Charter, if anyone cares about minor technicalities. Whether they are developing nuclear weapons, actually no one knows, but maybe they are. If so, it would certainly be understandable as long as they're under constant threat. However, Iran's threat, the reports continue, Pentagon intelligence, they go beyond deterrence. Iran is also trying to expand its influence in neighboring countries. The Pentagon and the intelligence services report. That is, they're trying to destabilize the region. It's an interesting term, actually. Those are the technical terms of foreign policy discourse. Notice when the U.S. invades and occupies Iran's neighbors, that's stabilization. Iran's efforts to extend its influence to them is destabilization, hence plainly illegitimate. That's routine usage. Just to give one striking example, a very prominent foreign policy analyst, James Chase, he was properly using the term stability in the technical sense when he explained, quoting him, that to achieve stability in Chile in 1973, it was necessary to destabilize the country, namely by overthrowing the elected government and installing a vicious dictatorship. That's the right usage. Other concerns about Iran are equally interesting to explore, but perhaps that's enough to reveal the guiding principles and their status in imperial culture, as to again go back to grand area planning. President Roosevelt's planners emphasized at the dawn of the contemporary world system that the U.S. cannot tolerate any exercise of sovereignty that interferes with its global designs. That's what it means to own the world and to rule it. The United States and Europe are united in punishing Iran for its threat to stability, but it's useful to recall how isolated they are. They're referred to as the international community, but remember that has a technical meaning too. The international community means the United States by definition, and anyone who happens to agree with it at the moment. That's the international community. Everyone else is kind of like Arabs in their opinion. So what about the non-people? Well, the non-aligned countries, that's the majority of the world's population, they have vigorously supported Iran's right to enrich uranium all the way through. Within the region, as I mentioned, Arab public opinion not only supports their right to carry out uranium enrichment, but quite strongly favors Iranian nuclear weapons. The major regional power, Turkey, voted against the latest U.S.-initiated sanctions motion in the Security Council, along with Brazil, which is the most admired country of the South. In fact, Europe and the United States are extremely isolated on this. They are the international community by definition, but by other standards, they're very isolated. The disobedience of Turkey and Brazil led to sharp censure, not for the first time. Turkey had been bitterly condemned in 2003 when the government followed the will of 95% of the population and refused to participate in the invasion of Iraq. That demonstrated their very weak grasp of democracy in the Western sense. And they were punished by the U.S. for that and charged in a very hostile commentary. Same after their refusal to support the U.S. sanctions proposal in 2010. Turkey was warned by Obama's top diplomat on European affairs that it must demonstrate its commitment to partnership with the West. A scholar in the Council on Foreign Relations asked, how do we keep the Turks in their lane where they're supposed to be, acting like good Democrats and following orders? Brazil's President Lula, he was admonished in a New York Times headline that his effort with Turkey to provide a solution to the Iranian uranium enrichment issue outside the framework of U.S. power is what they called a spot on the Brazilian leader's legacy. In brief, do what we say or else. There's an interesting sidelight to all of this, which was effectively suppressed. That is that the Iran-Turkey-Brazil deal was approved in advance by the Obama administration, presumably on the assumption that it would fail, that would provide an ideological weapon against Iran. Actually, after the censure of Brazil, its foreign office released a letter from President Obama in which he had urged Brazil to proceed with it, expecting that it would fail. Well, when it succeeded, the approval turned to censure, and Washington rammed through a Security Council resolution which was in fact so weak that China readily signed. And China, incidentally, is now chastised for living up to the UN resolution that it signed, but not living up to Washington's unilateral directives, which go well beyond it. It's in the current issue of Foreign Affairs, major foreign policy journal. Well, the U.S. can sort of tolerate Turkish disobedience, though with some dismay, but China's harder to ignore. The press warns that China's investors and traders are now filling a vacuum in Iran as businesses from many other nations, particularly in Europe, pull out. And in particular, China's expanding its dominant role in Iran's energy industries. Washington is reacting to this with a touch of desperation. The State Department warned China that if it wants to be accepted in the international community, which has the definition I mentioned, if it wants to be accepted in the international community, then it must not skirt and evade international responsibilities, which are clear. Follow U.S. orders. I'm sure that elicited some amusement in China's foreign offices. They're unlikely to be impressed. There's also a good deal of concern about the growing Chinese military threat. A Pentagon study came out recently, and it warned that China's military budget is approaching 1/5 of what the Pentagon spent to operate the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's, of course, a fraction of the U.S. military budget. They warned further that China's expansion of military forces might deny the ability of American warships to operate in international waters off its coast. That's off the coast of China. Nobody yet has declared that the U.S.